Welcome, everyone. My name is Stuart Williams, and I am the Vice President of Operations for the Warrior Alliance. And good afternoon, and I welcome you to the second Veteran Social Justice Forum. Our mission is to help warriors and their families achieve a fulfilling civilian life by promoting collaboration between the organizations that can support them during the transition from military service. We are delighted to bring to the forefront the need for dialogue and action to address the current issues we are facing as a country. We believe that by having critical conversations that focus on solutions, we can empower the veteran community to take collective action in order to affect positive change. We are an organization that believes in the power of collaboration, and we are honored to be partnering with Vetlanta and others to bring this forum to you. Our theme for today's forum will be centered around social activism and community engagement. Today, we are honored to be joined by a group of distinguished panelists that come from a cross-sector of veteran and non-veteran leaders that represent both local and national organizations. I would now like to introduce to you Mr. Lloyd Knight from Vetlanta to share a few welcome remarks with all of you.
Great, thank you, Stuart. I appreciate it. And I'm so proud of the partnership between Vetlanta and the Warrior Alliance with leading the social justice conversation, but also the action we are taking as a veteran community to drive and implement change. The entire veteran population is not perfect. However, a majority of us live by a set of core values, including integrity, respect, professionalism, and honor, which puts us in the perfect spot to leverage and influence our communities. And discussions like this are a great start to move the nation to change. Change to make us better people, make our communities better, and to forge a greater nation. If you haven't heard of Atlanta, we are a chartered club based in Atlanta, striving to make our community the premier destination in the country for veterans and their families to work and live. We are non-funded and focused on collaboration, volunteerism, and networking. In the last 7 years, our membership has grown to over 2,000 participants, representing industry, small business, nonprofits, academia, and government organizations. Our core engagement is our quarterly summits, and our next summit is actually tomorrow from 4:30 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are really honored to have Medal of Honor recipient Flo Groberg as our keynote speaker. If you are interested in attending, I will drop the link to register in the chat session. Thank you for joining this session and being the advocates our nation so much needs. Back to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Lloyd. And before we go on, it's important that I share with everyone that as a convener for holistic veteran care, the Warrior Alliance hosts these social justice forums as a means to provide interactive discussion on the racial and social injustice facing our society, with the aim to inspire and empower the veteran and military community to take collective action and promote positive change. The Warrior Alliance does not represent any political party, affiliation, or organization. So with that being said, I am going to take this opportunity to introduce to you Mary Tobin, our moderator for, oh, no, before we get to Mary, I'm sorry. I am going to introduce to you Kevin Horgan from Vetlanta to give his charge. Thank you, Kevin. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I appreciate it. My name is Kevin Horgan, and I am a proud collaborator with the Warrior Alliance as a board member of Vetlanta in the series of Veterans for Social Justice forums that you are engaged in. The partnership of veteran service organizations is a strong one, and we have one central mission: to take care of each other. There are many things that bind veterans together aside from the obvious. We cannot be late, and we do not usually tolerate those who habitually are. We all tend to support in spirit, if not in fact, Kipling's maxim that a person cannot have too many books, too much red wine, or too much ammunition. We laugh together at what those who have not worn a uniform will never quite understand. And I believe that all veterans know there is a fundamental difference between right and wrong, and we are not afraid to call out evil. The veteran knows brutality. It is our stock and trade. We are trained to do it and bring it when necessary, but we possess an overarching ability to discipline ourselves towards patience and restraint and even kindness. The best thing veteran service organizations can do in a time when vitriol turns to the vulgar and the bullhorn replaces conversation is to listen. Listen to the person who needs to express their humanity. Listen to the person who believes they are being marginalized. Listen before we jump to the wrong conclusion. Listen to the combat veteran. He or she never asks others to obey, but to understand that it can be crushingly difficult to be abused at home rather than be downrange. That person is perhaps different than you and me and has walked a tougher road, their own version of hell, one that some will never experience, one that everyone can learn from by listening. And you and I can be a better person in order that we all become the better people we want our nation to aspire to if we listen first. We are a common people who give each other dignity, mostly earned and sometimes unearned. Our mutual cooperation is the real stuff of equality and of the responsibility that comes with our freedoms. The Warrior Alliance and Vetlanta are committed to do the right thing. With your input and involvement and engagement, we, as veterans, will assist in building a better community for all Americans long into the future. Our children and grandchildren are watching and listening. We cannot let them down. Well, thanks for listening, and Semper Fi. Now I want to turn it over to Mary Tobin, who's leading our panel discussion tonight.
Hello, 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 everybody. My name is Mary Tobin, and today I will be your proud moderator for today's discussion on social justice and community engagement. We expect this time together to be incredibly passionate, informative, and hopefully you'll take away some things that you can do to improve your local community wherever you may be. I am a proud member of the Warrior Alliance, supporting the amazing things that we do in and around Atlanta and around the rest of the country. I'm also a political appointee in the Biden-Harris administration, and I get to do this work every single day as the Senior Advisor for Wounded Warrior, Military, Family, and Veteran Initiatives for AmeriCorps. I hope that all of you are actively involved in your communities wherever you may be. Now, we're going to lay some ground rules for this conversation today. Now, today is a public discussion, not a debate. Although I have encouraged our panelists to go back and forth and to challenge each other as we have this discussion. We appreciate and accept diverse opinions. We're going to avoid blame, speculation, and any inflammatory language, as hard as that may be for veterans. And we're going to show gratitude for every single act of expression, because every act of expression is an act of courage. This space will be free of express judgment, and everyone is welcome into this space to share your ideas, perspectives, ideas without being judged. Now, what are some of the ways that you can share your ideas and perspectives without being judged? There's a chat box. We want you to get involved. If you hear something that you like, something that you agree with, something that you don't agree with, chat. Go ahead and text that in there. We also have a Q&A function. You can ask questions of the panelists. You can ask questions of anything that you've heard here today, and we'll do our very best to get to those questions during this session. We'll also give you an opportunity to follow up with our panelists. They are actively working in the spaces that they'll be talking about today. So they're our subject matter experts today. Please, 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 if you have a question, follow up with them. Remember, this is going to be a passionate, informative, and could get heated discussion, right? But we want you to consider the following. Listen actively with an ear to understand everybody's views. Ask questions to seek clarification. As you engage with others in the chat box, remember, attack the problem, not the person, because we are leaders and we are problem solvers. And do not leave this discussion without having new perspectives, new connections, and renewed hope, inspiration, and determination. With that being said, we're going to get right into this. I want to introduce the panelists, and I'm going to give each of you a chance to give us a few things about yourself. And we're going to start with you, Lindsay. I would like for you to tell us who you are, what organization you're representing, what connection to the military or national service you have, if any, and give us a leadership quote, something that is inspiring you right now.
Hi, thank you for having me, Mary. My name is Lindsay Church. I'm the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Minority Veterans of America. I'm a Navy veteran, third generation. My leadership quote is actually 6 years old. I heard it in about 2015. It's from an organizer out in Seattle named Akita Oliver. Her quote inspired me to change the way that I thought of things. She said that you can't have equality until you have equity. And it really changed me and inspired me to really change the way that I did things and the way that I was organizing.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing that quote with us. And if you would, you could put that in the chat box too, so we can all reference that a little bit later. Okay, Vernice, you're up next.
What's up? I am Bernice Fly Girl Armor coming at you, and USMC veteran, flew Cobras, couple tours in Iraq, stationed at Headquarters Marine Corps as a diversity officer liaison to the Pentagon for my last duty station. Got out, started speaking, leadership, inspirational leadership, and social justice is just, to me, it's very personal. And I would think it is for everyone, you know, as we get into the discussion about what social justice really is. But I'm excited to be here today. And my number one quote that I keep thinking about over and over and over right now for this moment, it's Marissa Pencolis Estes. And she simply stated, "Do not fear, we were made for these times."
Whew, that fired me up. We were made for these times. Absolutely. Jeremy, I don't know how you're gonna hop in after that one, but you're up next.
I had a feeling you were going to make me follow that, but that's all right. I'll give it my best shot. So thank you, Mary. I'm Jeremy Butler. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I'm a Navy veteran, still in the Navy Reserves. Been in and out of active duty as a reservist since I came off active duty back in 2006, which is really what led me to joining Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, wanting to help my fellow veterans and fellow active duty members in the ways that I saw that kind of our country was failing them and the systems were failing them. So that kind of ties in. So my quote, it's not so much a quote as a theory, I guess you could say. Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, is well known for making it well known. I think he would admit that it wasn't his idea. He just kind of synthesized it and got it out there. But it's really the idea of extreme ownership is the phrase he uses. And it's really just taking ownership of whatever problem is that you see and making sure that it gets fixed. It's not passing blame. It's not pushing it off to someone else. It's taking ownership of the problem and being a part of the solution.
I love that, Jeremy. Extreme ownership. I probably take too much extreme ownership. And Nathaniel, we're going to have you bring up the rear. You're certainly last but not least. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mary. It is truly an honor to have an opportunity to participate on this panel. My name again is Nathaniel Smith, and I serve as the founder and chief equity officer of the Partnership for Southern Equity, where we're working to realize a new Southern agenda for racial equity and shared prosperity in the American South. I have not had the honor of serving in the military. The furthest I got was battalion commander in high school. But what I will say is that I was raised by incredible people who served this country in the military, from an uncle who was a cook in World War II, all the way to other individuals that have taken the time to serve this nation. And for everyone on this panel and listening, thank you for your service and your sacrifice and the sacrifices that you've made for this country. For me, one of the quotes that I have embraced in my life journey is actually a quote from Cornel West. And he says that in order to lead, you have to be willing to serve. And that is something that I have tried my best to embrace in my leadership journey.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I hope everybody, as you're listening to these quotes, you were taking notes. I certainly was. I'm going to go back and watch this recording. And right before we jump into the questions, one of my favorite quotes is from John Lewis, and it says, "Freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we must all take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair and just society." I think everyone, we have an example of this generation doing its part in these panelists here today, and we're so honored to have you here. And thank you to the Warrior Alliance of Atlanta for sponsoring this. So let's hop right into this, right? So a working definition of social justice is the idea that everyone deserves equal rights and opportunities and to be treated without prejudice. When an institution makes decisions that discriminate against someone because of things like their race, their religion, age, ability, gender, or sexuality, this is called social injustice. So the first question that I want to ask to the panelists is, tell us about the work you are involved in regarding social justice and why it's relevant. Or if we say this in veteran terms, why should we care about the work that you're doing? And Jeremy, I'm going to popcorn it to you first. Why are you doing the work that you're doing, and why should we care about what you're doing?
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's interesting because it got me thinking about our organization. And there are times when I don't even necessarily think of ourselves as a social justice movement, but the reality is that we are, and it's because we're fighting for literally every veteran that's out there, everyone that's in the military. And in the past, that's meant white men. And the reality that we all know is that the military is made up of far more than that. And it always has been. You know, people seem to think, oh, you know, women are now in combat. You know, that just happened a few years ago, or African Americans are now actually in some of these roles. But that has been true throughout our nation's history. The problem is that our country has often overlooked that. So a lot of what we focus on is making sure that those overlooked communities are getting as much attention and frankly getting the benefits and the recognition that they've earned and they deserve.
Thank you for that. I love that. Overlooked communities. And I'm gonna come to you, Lindsay, to talk about what you're doing. I mean, in your name, in the name of the organization, Minority Vets, could you tell us about the work that you're doing and why should we care about what you're doing?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. And also thank you for the definition. I think that helps frame kind of the work that we do really well. The part about institutional discrimination is literally the work that MVA does. So Minority Vets was founded by myself and my co-founder, who's a woman of color. And between the two of us, we recognize I would never understand what it felt like to be a person of color in this country. And she would never understand what it felt like to be a queer, non-binary person in this world. But what we did understand was mutual marginalization, and that there were more than just us that were being marginalized by the system. And in being institutionally discriminated against both through the DoD and into the VA system. So the work that MVA does, we focused on building an intersectional movement of minority vets. So recognizing that it's easy to say, like, there's only 2.2 million women veterans out there. There's only 1 million LGBTQ vets. There's only 5.5 million veterans of color and 1.6 million religious minorities. Between all of those communities, you're looking at small portions of the veteran population. But when you bring us all together and you say, we're all getting harmed by this system, when we come together, we create a larger voice and we create the ability to change. And so in the last 3 years, we fought, we're about 3 years old. We have 2,200 members across the country. We are overrepresented in every minority category in our work, but the work that we do is really trying to break down those institutional injustices and inequities and fighting for a more equitable community for all of us. Much to Jeremy's point, fighting for an equitable community for all of us, or for minority veterans, is fighting for the whole community at large. So I think people think that, like, just me advocating for minority vets is asking for special treatment, and it's not. It's about me saying, you're institutionally discriminating against communities that we serve, and you have been since the beginning of the military. And now it's time to end. We have a larger voice than you've ever seen, and we will continue to grow. And now is the time to change, and that's why it's relevant.
I love that. I love data, folks. You were spitting some facts just now, and I love that. And one of the things that you just talked about was the idea of, listen, if I win, you all win. We all win. I call it the myth of the apple pie. Somebody told us one day that there's only one apple pie, and now we fight over those pieces, right? When in reality, we can make as many pies as we want to, right? And so I'm going to shift down to Nathaniel to talk to us about what are you doing in regards to social justice, why it's relevant, and then also why it's relevant to veterans, right? You're the one non-veteran here, but you probably find that there are a lot of veterans that work with you or are involved with your work. So could you talk to us about that?
Well, I mean, I think just from a place-based perspective, I believe that the South in particular has been ground zero for the American experiment. You know, it has been a place where freedom has been fought for and against, where certain communities have been marginalized in order to support an economy where people work for free to realize that economy. But at the same time, there has been a history of resilience and know-how and courage that has manifested itself in so many ways that have not only affected the South, but the nation. And I always say to people, you know, and I believe this in my heart, so goes the South, so goes the nation. And so if we are going to create a world and not just a nation that is just, that is inclusive, that realizes opportunity for all people and does not stand in the way of anyone to reach their full potential, regardless of their zip code or the color of their skin, we have to start here. And through the work of the Partnership for Southern Equity, we work with the private sector, nonprofit organizations, communities, academia, government, to begin the process of influencing the structures and systems that have played a role in advancing an unjust and structurally racist agenda. We cannot change systems through programs. We have to do that through public policy. And the work that we do is to transform not only policy, but also people. Because we also understand that policy, in essence, is a reflection of the values of people in power, right? So we have to begin the process of moving that work forward. And, you know, I'll just say quickly, you know, the tagline, and I'm really encouraged by where this conversation is going, because we do have to understand that we have a shared destiny as a community. And the tagline of the Partnership for Southern Equity is "Together we prosper," because I do believe that we will not do well unless we all do well, and that we have to work together to ensure that it happens. And why is it then that I believe the military and people in the military are just critical agents for change and for equity? Is because you all every day have put your lives on the line to protect our democracy. And at the end of the day, equity cannot live in a society without a strong participatory democracy. So you are the keepers of that destiny by way of your service and your sacrifice. And the work does not happen, it cannot happen overseas or in other places. You have to be soldiers for equity in America. And I think the equity movement provides an opportunity for you to do that.
I love that. Soldiers for Equity. Nathaniel, I think you probably have some preachers in your background. I can probably, I hear it in your voice, giving me a little MLK there. Thank you for that and that call to action. And we're definitely going to touch on that a little bit later. And then bringing up the rear on this question, I'm asking Vernice for you to tag in here. My claim to fame is the best macaroni and cheese this side of Atlanta, but your claim to fame as the first African-American female combat pilot has led you to this journey of social justice. Could you talk to us about the things that you do and why we should care about the things that you're doing right now?
Right. Well, first of all, the keepers of our destiny. I was like, boom, mic drop. I had to write that down, Nathaniel. You will get credit for. I don't know if you came up with that or you took that from somebody equitably, but I was like, I love that. So why am I here? Why do I care about social justice and why do I feel like you care? Well, number one, I never wanted to be one of the guys, right? And I always wanted to be part of the team. And having been in many male-dominated career fields, first I was a police officer. I did enlist in the Army first, then I saw the light, became a United States Marine. You know, we got to get it in. We got to get it in. We got to get it in. All right. You know, the folks who have been members of our military armed forces really are the keepers of our democracy and our liberty. And when I saw some of the things that were happening inside of the military, you know, and in our country, I wanted to do something to be a part of the solution. You know, as a little kid, I wanted to be a cop because I wanted to help the folks in my community, right? So now as a speaker or an entrepreneur or a business owner, you know, I get to leverage my platform to say, hey, no one popped out the womb qualified. No one popped out the womb we all popped out the womb the same way, maybe with different circumstances, but knowing the same thing, nothing. So what we do with what we know now is truly up to us. And we can preach to the choir, which are just the people around us who believe the same thing, or we can try to engage our community, folks with many differing opinions, thoughts, and beliefs and values, to try to get together to where we want to go, right? One mission, one goal, one team, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. So I'm here.
Thank you for that, Bernice. I appreciate that. And y'all, all of you all were dropping gems, and I hope folks are taking notes. I know I was. I'm about to start a fight. What's the most important movement happening right now today? You just come off of mute. What's the most important movement?
The human movement.
Human movement. What does that mean?
We're all in it together. We might not all have two legs, but we had that possibility at one point. We all got, hopefully we all have a beating heart. We all have the brain in our head, and again, how we come together as a community moving forward together, whether it's global warming and people believe in it or they don't, but I bet everyone cares about our planet and how we're evolving and what we're going to leave our great grandkids, right? So at the end of the day, I believe we all want the same thing. It's just how we're getting there. So the movement as a society, as a community, as a global community. And for us today, I don't know if we're specifically talking, just our nation, the United States, but it's the butterfly effect, right? The flap of a butterfly wing makes an impact all the way around the world. So we're not doing anything by ourselves. And I think all of us, coming from this type of structure, whether it's community or our nation, we know that doing it together is what's going to get it done.
Absolutely. So human movement. Texas just happened. Does anybody care about climate change?
I hope so. It affects so much in so many ways, and I think a lot of people overlook the fact that it's being discussed. Since this is a veterans discussion, this is a hot topic within the Department of Defense. So depending on, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you are, you got to realize that even in what is often considered, the most Republican, if you will, of the departments, it's a top priority because it definitely affects the way our fighting forces are going to be able to deploy and operate. So it's important. And I think the vast majority of the public realize that. It's just that they're not always heard in the social media and the way things are often portrayed.
Jeremy, say a little bit more about how that's impacting, how you've seen that impact our fighting forces.
Yeah, it's all about logistics. At the end of the day, that's the phrase is that, amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics, because it doesn't matter, if you're talking Navy SEAL, Special Forces, the sharpest end of the very tip of the spear, they can't do their job if they aren't backed up by a long line of supplies. And that usually means power, it means fuel, it means food, water, all these things that we have to get to them. And the harder that it is to generate those commodities, the more we have to truck in things like fuel and stuff like that, the harder it's going to be to operate. Ships use a lot of fuel every day. We're out there doing underway replenishment so that we can stay underway. The more we can come up with systems that rely less and less on fossil fuels, the better we're going to be in so many ways. We're going to be faster, we're going to be lighter, we're going to spend a lot less money on getting these commodities to where they need to be. And that's better for everybody, not just the Department of Defense. It certainly collaborates over and carries over to the civilian world.
And Mary, if I may, I wanted to make sure that I also added the racial equity movement. I believe that we are living in a society that has yet to own the legacy of structural racism and its effect not only on communities of color, but on white communities as well. You have some segments of our community that are still fighting the Civil War. If that was not the case, then we would not have had Confederate flags flying in the US Capitol during the insurrection that we experienced. But not only is this original sin of structural racism and its constant effects on our communities are still prevalent, whether it be around redlining, the challenges that people face around climate issues, or even their ability to have access to economic opportunity. Racism still is a dominant challenge for many of us. We do a lot of work in the climate space as well as health equity. And I always argue with people that structural racism is a social determinant of health. I mean, all we have to do is see what we're experiencing with COVID-19. And so if we acknowledge that, then yes, one of my heroes is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he really worked hard to ensure that all people had a chance to express and see everyone's humanity. And this belief that we're all God's children is something that drives me to do this work. But everybody's house is not on fire the same. And we have to understand that if we are going to move forward. And so that is why the conversation about equity is important, because yes, if you live in a neighborhood, all houses do matter, but we've got to focus on the houses that are on fire if we want to make sure that the whole neighborhood will survive. And that is what the work around racial equity is about.
Absolutely. And we see, we have our first African-American Secretary of Defense. There's an entire task force being stood up to address extremism in the military, to address racial inequity, right? So obviously, this is incredibly important to the men and women in our fighting forces, right? And obviously to our leaders. And we'll touch back on that when we talk about some other issues I want to ask. I want to pull out, what other movements are you seeing that you think are at the forefront of what's happening in our country right now?
So I want to dovetail on what Nathaniel said. I think I'm a big proponent of the way that to address the greatest disparities first. And I think that that race is the largest indicator of your outcomes, whether it be around economics, employment, health. All of the largest indicators of our livelihood and our ability to live a full life are impacted deeply by race. And I think that in order to truly create an equitable society, we have to be looking at what are the greatest disparities first, rather than trying to create a blanket movement for everybody. Because at that point, like, we're not necessarily addressing, to Nathaniel's point about not all houses are on fire. We have to be looking at what is a house on fire, and what is the greatest disparity that we're seeing, and what is the greatest economic indicator, health indicator. All of those things point back to racism being institutionalized in every part of American society. This is the most important movement that almost any of us will ever live through. And if we don't recognize our place in that now, we're going to miss the movement, and it's going to completely pass, and we're going to see another 100, 200 years of institutionalized racism. But we have a moment right now to be the actual Reconstruction era, to really, truly reconstruct society and do it right this time.
Absolutely. I'm going to start another fight.
Can I say something to that real quick before we start the next fight?
It's the same fight, but yeah, go for it.
So I was sharing with a couple of friends this morning. My grandfather was a Mumford Point Marine, one of the first Black Marines, right, to desegregate the Marine Corps. So I'm actually third generation Marine Corps. My dad was Marine, and I fought Korean War and Vietnam as well. And I remember recording my grandfather, because we always try to capture the history and the legacy, especially from our elders in the Black community. And I was asking him about his time in the Marine Corps and how Granddad, why'd you choose the Marine Corps? And he said, well, I knew the Marines were the toughest, and I didn't think they would take me. So I went there because I thought they would turn me away and I'd be home by dinner. Next thing I knew, I was on the bus. I was like, okay. And he said, when I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I could have hoped to have been a steward, a butler, infantry, something on the front lines. I never could have imagined my granddaughter would be an officer and a pilot. He said, baby, in his grumbly voice, baby, you can do anything. That just wasn't we didn't have those opportunities, but you can do anything. And that was the first time in my life hearing that you can do anything. Anything's possible. The sky's the limit. That was the first time I heard it. When I heard it, I felt it. Tears came to my eyes. And when my commanding officer in my squadron calls me to his office and says, Lieutenant Armour, why does the media want to interview you? What makes you so special? I'm like, sir, nothing makes me special or more special than the other pilots in the squadron. We all want to go out there and save the lives of the men and women on the ground. And if I may speak, when someone from my family, the first person to graduate from college, Harvard or Princeton graduates, we're gonna have a party, we're gonna celebrate. Our community right now is celebrating for all the years of lack of access that we had. So it's not taking away from anything that folks have had the opportunity to do before. It's celebrating the opportunity we now have. And when I wrote my essay for Marine Corps University, right before I got out, I started out with, I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm a woman, I am invisible. I wrote the essay, and at the very end, I said, I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm a woman, I am not invisible. And again, how do we create the community of equity where you can't just kick transgender folks out with a tweet, right? The people in power control the policy. The policy tells what kind of situation we're in. So Nathaniel, that was another good one. We have an opportunity, like Lindsay just said, in this moment, this time, when the conversation is so loud, it's so raging, it's so hot, it's so polarized, we can actually do something. If we stick to it and do it, no matter how hard it gets, we can do hard things. Glenn and Doyle.
I love it. All of you all are like motivational speakers right now. I'm gonna start a fight still though. I don't care how inspired I just felt. What about everybody who says it's not the race issue that's the most important? They point to money and they go, it's class, because there are poor white folks who have never had access to all the things that Black folks and gay folks and Muslim folks are fighting for. And they feel just as disenfranchised as some of the other more vocal minorities. What do we say?
Okay, I know I'm interrupting. Just because you started the fight. They might be in Appalachia or wherever, and I know this is being recorded. I grew up in Tennessee, so I can say that. They might not have made the progress, but they absolutely had the access. Had they just gone on and put on a suit or whatever and walked into another city where no one knew them, they would have had the same privilege, right, that their other white counterparts did. So it is race, because those ships went to the coast of Africa and got the race of the Black folks, right, and brought them over here. So, you know, we can talk about gender and money and all of that stuff, but you know what? At the end of the day, so much boils down to what you look like, where you came from, and all the other things are secondary.
So I hear you. I'm gonna keep playing devil's advocate. Somebody else hop in here, because
Can I know?
Please go ahead.
this is what we hear, right? The leaders in these spaces and places, this is what we hear. So hop in here, y'all. Fight me.
Well, I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And I think that if we're serious about the work and of elevating the consciousness of people, then we have to have a conversation based on the facts. I mean, we know statistics has shown us that a white person with a high school education has more wealth. Well, actually, a white person that has dropped out of high school has more wealth than a Black person with a college degree. So that has nothing to do with class. And really, I believe, in particular in the Black community, it's a buy one, get one free proposition anyway. You know, you cannot talk about class without talking about race, and vice versa when you're talking about the Black community. So again, you know, I think one of the you know, and I'll talk quickly about this. You know, one of the things that I've really been excited about in this era of time is that we're beginning to get a lot of statistics and a lot of facts. There are a lot of different articles and pieces and books and publications that are coming out that are clearly articulating the racial issues that we have and how it has not only affected communities of color, but also helped to build this nation. And again, I mean, I just think that it's just really important for us to, when we are having these conversations, to understand that they're emotional conversations, but to do a twofer, in my opinion, to be grounded by the facts. But we know that sometimes fear can trump facts. And that is why we have to, in my opinion, begin to focus on what Dr. King called a values revolution, and really begin to influence not only what the data is saying, but also what is in people's hearts. And so it's a complicated thing, but if someone is still saying that, it's obviously they're in denial, because the data is showing something entirely different than that perspective.
Absolutely. Lindsay, you hop in here.
Okay, so I'm going to tell a personal anecdote for why I think this is wrong, and why I advocate for race as the very first thing that we shoot for. So I grew up poor as hell, and I was a daughter of a military veteran, a woman veteran who was a single parent. We were poor as hell. Grew up and moving around everywhere. I lived in the Midwest for a bit, and my mom was not really around for a while. And my sister and I had free reign, which meant we got into all sorts of trouble. I used to shoplift for like 6 months. My sister would send me down to steal food, which is like, we needed food. My mom wasn't paying. Well, my mom didn't bring food home, right? So I was down in the gas station stealing candy bars, stealing anything that I could because I was taking it home to my family. Yeah, cool. We were poor. I got caught shoplifting. What did that police officer do? That police officer came in, picked up my bag, put it in the back of his car. He took me home, and I got home perfectly safe and sound. When I got home, my sister had been throwing a party with her friends, and she didn't want my mom to find out, so she had been smoking all of the pot. She had box fans blowing out the window. Now, what does this police officer smell as soon as he walks out of his car? All he smells is pot everywhere. My mom's not home. We get to the front, like he knocks on the door and he's like, ma'am, I have a reasonable suspicion to believe that you're smoking marijuana. This is the 90s. So like, this was not a cool time to be smoking marijuana. What happened? All of those white kids, they got sent home to their parents. I got grounded by my mother. My sister got a lot of trouble with my mother. Did any of us get in trouble with the police? No. Did any of us end up get harmed by the police? No. I got my bike put in the back of a police car and sent home. And my sister, nobody got in trouble. This is not a system that is equal. There's more than economics here that need to be in play. And white folks that come from poor backgrounds, these are the opportunities to build coalitions, but not to take the mic. I grew up poor. I understand like the lack of socioeconomics, like that is a movement builder to be able to bring coalitions between identity groups. Poor white folks and folks that are fighting for racial justice make natural allies, or we can be enemies. And it doesn't make any sense to be enemies because we're all fighting the same person.
I love it. I love how I got everybody worked up. And I love the passion that's coming through and the personal experiences that are coming through as well. I want to touch a little bit on this, right? So if we collectively on this panel are saying, you know what, race is the big thing that we need to be leaning in on right now because it impacts so many other things. What characteristics or leadership attributes of the veteran community do you think help us in this fight for racial equity? What about us makes us, and I saw you come off mute, Jeremy, what about us makes us like just primed for this particular fight?
Yeah, and I came off mute quickly because I was just talking about this weekend, actually on another panel that Lindsay and I were on. And it's that right now, at least for the time being, veterans are viewed probably more favorably than any other group for the most part in the country. So we have a platform right now that the civilian public sees us as honorable. They see us as folks that work across the political lines. We are seen as nonpartisan when we're in uniform. So we have an opportunity and an ability to speak truth to power, if you will. A lot of times, people will listen to veterans simply because they're a veteran. You go to town halls and things like that, and doesn't matter what kind of dressing down the political candidate might be getting. If it's coming from a veteran, if it's coming from someone in uniform, they're going to listen a lot more respectfully than they would if it was just civilian, if you will. So right now, the events of January 6th shook us a little bit because we saw a lot of veteran and military involvement in the attacks on the Capitol, but we still are in a position right now, I think, where most of the country sees veterans and sees military as an honorable group that is doing what is best for the country and not what is just best for their political party or whatever small group they're speaking for.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Yeah, the platform that we have and the political capital and the social capital that we have is viewed more favorably in some cases. Anyone else? What other attributes of veterans do you think make us perfect, right, for this social justice fight, whatever area it might be in? It could be race, it could be, immigrants, it could, whatever it may be. What do you think about us, this particular community, make us perfect for these fights?
So I'll jump in here and then get out of the way quickly. Veterans have always been movement leaders in general. You can go back to, looking at especially the fight for racial justice. The fight for racial justice is not new in the veteran community. You can look at Harriet Tubman and the abolitionist movement. You can look at Black Panther Party founders. Albert, I lost his last name. I'm so sorry. It's in my notes. Albert Howard. He was an Air Force veteran, a co-founder of the Black Panther Party. You can see veterans throughout history, whether it be the World War II veterans organizing for the GI Bill. Veterans have been organizing since the military was a thing. We're really just good at movement organizing. I think that, much to Jeremy's point, we have a valid voice in society. We have the ability to really speak to the pain of serving and to really, truly loving our country so much that we were willing to sacrifice no matter what our reason for serving was. I also think that veterans make natural organizers, and we're really good at moving people, whether it be moving people logistically or moving people through their value systems. Like when we talk about the way that we train troops, we have to get people on a somewhat similar value set by the time that we're ready to mobilize. This is a unique skill set from the military, and in addition, we've also seen the military has been like the beginning grounds for almost every integration, whether it be racial integration in the service, whether it be gender integration in the service. When you're talking about LGBTQ rights, a lot of that has been centered around don't ask, don't tell, the trans man. More rights have been earned for the trans community in the fight against the trans man when people realized how bad it was. So we have a natural set of skills and a trusted voice in society that we can leverage to create that change that we need.
I love it. You called us people movers. And I think we can take that literally and figuratively, right? And I love that description. I'm gonna slide over here to lightly touch this third rail. So Jeremy mentioned January 6th. And January 6th set off, I think, this much needed discussion around patriotism. And patriotism, simply defined, if you go on Webster's dictionary, Merriam-Webster, it is love for or devotion to one's country. So I want to open this discussion up, and I'm gonna popcorn this first to Vernice, and then Nathaniel, and then Jeremy and Lindsay, you hop in here. How do you define patriotism? What is it, or what isn't it?
Honestly, patriotism is what you just said. That's the definition. Now, people want to add what they want to it, right? And what they feel defines it for them. But patriotism is just that, love for one's country. Now, how we love our country, that's different, right? And that's where the friction starts to come in. KKK, right? That definition means they're patriots and they want to keep the country, their love of the country, the way it was. I don't agree with the way the country was, and let's go back to the good old days. No, the good old days weren't so good for me. So, what days do we want to create moving forward? But patriotism, what we choose to do with patriotism is really the question. What you choose to do with your patriotism, what I choose to do with my patriotism, what we as a nation choose to come together and do with our patriotism. So
thank you for challenging us to think about what we are doing with our patriotism. I love that. That goes back to your human movement that you talked about earlier. Nathaniel, I want you to hop in and talk about this. What you believe patriotism is, what it isn't, and what you would like to see it become.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong definition, a love of country. And I think the big question is, who do you love in that country, right? And I think it's all a matter of what type of love you've chosen to embrace as relates to the love of your country. Do you just love the powerful, or do you love people who are just like you, or do you love the aspects of the country that are driving an agenda that is not inclusive, or do you also love the poor? Do you also love the disenfranchised? Do you also love the marginalized? Do you love our planet? And the role that America plays in keeping it safe and in terms of our environment. So for me, it's about, true patriotism, in my opinion, is really about the amount of love that you have for all people that are a part of this country. And even more so, whether your love is superficial love, is it puppy love, right? Or is it really love that will compel you to give your life for your sister or your brother in the name of justice? That's the question that we have to answer.
Can I say something real quick? Because, Nathaniel got me thinking. So when people say they love the church, do they love the people in the church? Or do they love the bricks or the wood or the straw or whatever it is that creates the building of the church, right? And do you love the AME church, or do you love the Jehovah church, or do you love the Kojic church, or do you love the evangelical church, right? So love of country, just swap that out for love of church, and whatever someone defines as their church, whether it be the people or the building, or the people in the building, or what the people in the building look like, or where the people in that building come from, that's their country, that's their church, and that's what they love. So everybody's not gonna love everybody. Everybody doesn't go to Taco Bell or Red Lobster.
They should. Thank you. No, that I love that analogy. Thank you for that. You brought that home in a very real way. Do we love the building or the people? What should we be loving? Lindsay, the people, the building? What should we be loving?
So sorry, Jeremy, I'm gonna go out of order. Is that okay? So it's actually you bringing that up, Bernice. I appreciate that, because I was just thinking about the difference between patriotism and nationalism. So we see a lot of this idea, and I think people conflate the ideas, right? Like that patriotism and nationalism are the same thing, and they're not. Nationalism is wanting to build like a nation out of certain people and certain ideas. Patriotism is about loving your country. What is your country? And Bernice, to your point, the country, how do you define country? For me, I don't define country by borders. I also think borders should be illegal, but that's a different story. But we have to love the people within it. Our country isn't necessarily, it's not a flag. It's not a uniform that we all wear. It's not an ideal set as far as your Christian values. It's not your Muslim values. It's a country that we made up is made up by its people. And I think that it's really important to not conflate nationalism, which is like fighting for a nation to look a certain way, and patriotism, which is fighting for your fellow human being that you have an affinity to because you belong to the same country. So thank you for setting me up appropriately, and Jeremy, thank you for letting me.
No, that was good, because you were kind of going in a direction that I was going to go. Mary, you asked in the beginning, what is patriotism and also what is not? Lindsay started to get at that. And that's one of the things that's often in my head, and maybe this is going to come out in a way that's going to piss some people off. But to me, patriotism is not wearing a flag pin. It's not having 10 flags on your car. It's not walking around saying America is the best country ever. None of those, to me, tell me that you're patriotic. It's you saying some things. It's maybe you buying some swag to put around there, but it's really what you do to express your patriotism. Are you working to make things better for everyone in this country? Kind of going back to the beginning, are you taking ownership of your actions and of ways that we need to acknowledge and fix the wrongs that this country's had? I see this come up a lot of times when people are talking about the discussions of slavery and things like that in America, and they're like, why are we focusing all this time on the past? And we're the best country in the world. Sure, we made some mistakes, but let's forget about that and talk about how great we are. I think a great country, I think a patriotic country is one that talks very deeply about the mistakes it's made and how we got there and how we're going to fix things. That to me is real patriotism.
I love that. So Jeremy, wearing a "Don't Tread on Me" shirt is not patriotic?
I mean, you can be patriotic and do that, but that's not me. I don't, well, actually, I take that back because in the Navy, we actually have the Don't Tread on Me patch that goes on our uniform. And I feel like there's kind of been a co-opting of that thing too. And so that may end up changing in the future. So I sometimes wear the Don't Tread on Me patch when I'm wearing a uniform, but yeah, I don't have the t-shirts flying that.
I have a question.
Go
And I'm
for
probably, Lindsay, I'm going out of order. Lindsay, you seem like a order person, so just want to put that out there. Sherry, I see you laughing. I see you laughing at me, Sherry. What if love of country for someone is akin to how they show love, right? Like the 5 love languages. You can be acts of service, you can like gifts, you can like words of affirmation, you like quality time, you can like be touchy-feely, right? So someone, their love of country looks different than Jeremy's love of country or my love of country. So how they show it, I mean, this is so subjective, right? So if we want to talk about patriotism and what does it mean to be a patriot, and maybe what behaviors of patriotism best move our country forward. But again, it's so subjective, right? Because patriotism is a definition, love of country. What we do with it, how you love everybody don't love the same. And you're taking it for granted. I loved you, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be loved a different way, right? And that's why so many divorce rates at COVID, they were stuck together, loving each other the wrong way. So
and I think the powerful piece of what you're saying is actually, twofold, because how you choose to love is a different question than choosing to love at all, right? And I think with this question about patriotism, I don't care how you choose to show your love, right? Just love. And I think, and just love the country. And one of the big challenges, I think, is when we get caught up in the paraphernalia conversation, which is very similar to what we're seeing in the corporate community now, with all of these corporations now standing up and wanting to do work around racial equity, is that on many occasions, the marketing is more important than the meaning. And so, I agree that if you want to wear a flag to show your patriotism, that's one thing. But if the marketing, you wanting to pronounce your patriotism, is more important than you living your patriotism, then that is where the problem happens. And I think that is why that is why I believe, as someone that has not had the opportunity to serve, why the military is so important, because there is a saying that I say a lot in my speeches, that equity is love in action, right? And I believe that in many ways, your sacrifice, right, is love in action for this country. And if anybody is the most positioned to ensure that action realizes a place where all of us are loved and are provided an opportunity to reach their full potential, is through your leadership and your engagement.
I love that. You gave us a lot of mic drop moments just now, Nathaniel. And we're gonna shift to talking about what does love in action look like, coming from the veteran community in the social justice space. I sometimes say, for many of our white brothers and sisters who have served in uniform, that they serve this country because of what they believe it to be. And many of our Black and brown brothers and sisters serve this country because of what they hope it will become. So as we strive, right, as veterans, as veteran community, as military family community, those of us who are still in uniform, what are some of the calls to action? What are some of the ways that we can serve this country, right, for what we hope it will become? And we can popcorn this, y'all can come off from mute. What are some of the ways that we can begin to serve, right, to right those social injustice wrongs? Anybody?
I can jump in quickly. I think it's doing more listening and less talking, and that can be via social media and things like that. I think we touched on this a little bit when we were talking about economics and race and if you're poor and you're white, how that affects, unless is compared to being poor and black. I think one of the bigger problems is that there's a lot of disbelief in this country that there are issues because they haven't personally affected that person. And I think we saw this maybe the most with the killing of George Floyd. I think that started a discussion in this country where there was a lot of people who genuinely thought that racism was not a problem in this country anymore. And I've heard people directly say that, and they said that that was a wake-up call for them. Then there were additional incidents. People remember that what took place in Central Park with the black bird watcher and the woman calling the police on him. Those types of things, maybe because we were in a pandemic, they were really widely seen, I think, in a way that woke people up. More on the military side, if you remember the killing of Vanessa Guillen, Specialist Vanessa Guillen down in Fort Hood, Texas, young Hispanic woman who was serving her country, had reported that she'd been harassed, nothing was done, and she ended up being killed. I think these types of things were waking people up to the fact that there are real problems, and it's not a situation where people, in their view, some are just complaining too much. These are real things. And I think people need to do more of that soul searching and being open to hearing what other people's reality are and accepting those as truth.
Can I say something right there? That's going to be my new catchphrase. Can I say something right there? So when Jeremy, you say, some of these recent experiences have woken people up to, whoa, wait a minute. I thought things were better, but they're not. Okay, January 6th, chaos at the Capitol. We can all agree that that was horrendous. I mean, that literally was an assault on our democracy, period, end of story. And our policymakers can't even agree to hold people accountable. Now, some of the people who broke the glass and all that kind of stuff, yeah, they're good. But what about the catalyst of why that happened, the preparation, the molding of why that happened? And we're as our elected officials, that in it, I mean, we all know that was wrong. Even policymakers on both sides of the aisle, because it's really not about politics, but we are making it about politics. So we all know stuff is wrong, but we went to war, the Civil War, back a long time ago, a couple centuries, right? When literally our country was split on, don't take my property, they're picking my cotton. What's gonna happen to my business? What's gonna happen to my bank account? What's gonna happen to my 401k? Does that sound familiar? Does it sound familiar? That's the same thing people are saying today on why they're defending their stance. So I saw a couple comments in the chat. Does money play a role in this? Does capitalism play a role? Absolutely. That's what slavery was. And, when we talk about love of country, for some people, covering that up and not talking about that and protecting whatever is love of country versus uncovering, discussing, and resolving being love of country, right? So people, again, love looks differently. And how are we going to hold folks accountable when wrong is wrong is wrong? And I remember watching it unfold on the TV. And again, former law enforcement officer, right? Former soldier, once a Marine, always a Marine. We all know that had those been Black folks storming that Capitol, like in Wisconsin or Michigan or wherever it was, and where they were going to kidnap the governor, where it was a real plot, there is no equity. Lindsay was driven home with her backpack in the car. The guy who shot the 9 folks in the church was taking a Burger King before he was taken to jail. So we have to acknowledge what's really happening.
Let me hop in here though.
So,
what can veterans do? I think we all agree. We did North and South. We believe that what Bernice is saying, those things are unacceptable. For even if you believe differently about race, from a leadership standpoint, from an accountability standpoint, all the values and principles we learned.
I'm gonna start a fight.
Well,
I'm gonna start a fight. But General Miley walked across the Lafayette Square in his battle fatigues.
But what?
Right? So what can we do as veterans? Yeah, we can come together. But who's gonna come together? The folks that were marching in a row up the Capitol steps, or this group over here or this group over, like, so my question is, how do we come together to agree on what we really want to create as we move forward? Because at the end of the day, veterans are people. Veterans are Americans. I mean, and you don't even have to be a citizen to be in the military, first of all, right? But how do we bring people with so many different values and beliefs to what are we really fighting for? To march the Confederate flag through the Capitol or to do something else?
Well, I'll say this. We successfully did that at some point when we went through basic. So what is it about how we were indoctrinated into an institution, no matter what branch it is, right, that allowed us to come together and fight for a thing? And what can we use now? What can we do now? What from that time period, from what we've learned, what can we do now as veterans?
Can I say something, if I may? So there are a couple of things. I think the first thing is that I think veterans need to see themselves as part of a bigger movement. I think by marginalizing and putting the role of the veteran in a box as it relates to social justice minimizes the real opportunities that you all have to be a key player in advancing a deeper and broader movement for racial justice, if that is what we're talking about. And so what does that look like? You have many, many organizations that are trying to do this work that have minimal resources and minimal capacity. Some of you all were trained to do great things in the military, and many of these organizations would really benefit from your volunteering, being involved and really helping them to increase their capacity. There's some great veteran serving organizations on this panel. Volunteer. The second thing is, write a check. You do need resources in order to do this work. Regardless of whether you're a social justice organization or not, you still got to pay Georgia Power light bill. You still gotta, that doesn't absolve you from certain things. And so again, there are many smaller organizations that need your resources, that need your talent, they need your time. And so I'm really bringing it from the perspective of someone that's out on the front lines with various organizations that are doing a lot, with a little. And not only in terms of resources, but also in terms of capacity and know-how. And I just think there's a lot that you all could bring to help many of those organizations become more successful.
We definitely know how to do a lot with a little. Lindsay, I saw you come off of mute.
I did, and I wanted to dovetail a little bit back on your first question, or the quote that you had said about that white folks are because the country the country that we thought it was, and I think it's really important. I have a call to white veterans. Like, it's time to educate and self-reflect. There's nothing that's been more powerful in my whole life than realizing that there are so many moments where I wasn't the only one of me, and I looked like everybody else around me, relatively, speaking, but like that I haven't been otherized in many ways, and that I haven't fought institutionalized racism. Like, that is the most powerful force in all of our society. So I think first and foremost, I call on veterans who don't understand, and I think even not just white veterans. I think it's veterans in general. We are inculcated with a certain idea and a value set. And I think it's really important to recognize that women internalize misogyny, that folks internalize racism, that folks internalize homophobia. Like, we can be representative of an identity and still harm ourselves and our own community. So one, white folks need to educate themselves, but I think all of us really need to dig into what have we been taught and really educate ourselves and possibly uneducate ourselves about some of the things that we were taught. But after that, once we've educated ourselves, once we've really dug into what is this movement all about, one of the reasons why we were able to be successful in the military is that we have a common purpose. We have something that we are fighting for and fighting against. And we know that, and we know what that value set is. And I think American veterans have the opportunity to say, like, this is what we're fighting for. We're going to continue to fight for this. We're not going to stop fighting for this. We're going to be bold. We're going to be innovative, and we're going to go take on fights that aren't our own. And we're going to be a part of those communities and part of those movements. Like Nathaniel, to your point, like, there are ways that veterans can integrate into social movements that are not veteran movements. And I actually highly encourage folks to do so. You'll get your horizons will expand, and you'll have the opportunity to take that voice that you've earned and leverage that voice that has power and carries weight in society to say, hey, I'm a veteran. I understand what it feels like to sacrifice my life, limb, and everything in my livelihood to serve my country. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen to these folks right here because they're the fucking leaders. Excuse me. Oh, I was so close. I was so close. They're the leaders. You know, those are the
Good,
folks
that
that
was
we
good.
have
We're
to follow. I'm
recording too.
so
I love
sorry.
it.
I was so close. Jeremy knows this probably is not this is probably the longest I've ever made it. But these are the folks that we should be following. These are the folks that we need to be. These are the movement leaders that we all need to be following. And we need to champion those folks and the communities that they come from and really get into fights that we're not benefiting from because it's a benefit to society.
I love it. Unfortunately, this portion of the time together has to come to a close. I've taken like 3 pages of notes, y'all, like just on what y'all said. I've been inspired as a moderator, and I'm just going to recap what you all said. Number one, we need to listen more in this community. Just listen. As veterans, let's listen and believed lived realities and lived experiences. Veterans, we need to see ourselves as a part of a larger movement. Right? We've heard a lot of history here today. We've been about this life, right? As some folks would say, we're not new to this, we're true to this, right? We fight for social justice. 3, add capacity. Find ways to join organizations who are doing things that you feel very passionate about and jump in, get in the fight, help them organize, lead, all the things. And if you can't do any of that, write a check, right? That adds capacity as well. And last but not least, continue to fight. Sometimes we might need to be uneducated about some things and re-educate ourselves about some other things. And then let's help folks understand that we understand what it means to sacrifice for something greater than ourselves. And let's lean into that. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to our question and answer moderator, Sherry, to help us comb through some of these questions you all have been having.
So hi, everyone. Thanks, Mary. You've done you pick a good fight, and the gloves came off, and we like that. And I'm usually the one that says, no, let's not hit anybody, but I like this. Let's continue to hit. So here we go, swing. This question comes from an audience member. The relationship between law enforcement and communities continue to deteriorate over time. What, if any, do you believe veterans can do to help bridge that divide? And I like this thing that Mary does. We're just gonna popcorn that thing. Go ahead. Come off of mute and throw it in.
All right. I want to say something right here. So as a former law enforcement officer, I was given a presentation a couple weeks ago, and another law enforcement Black man said that he was torn in this moment. Like, what does he do? What side is he on? How does he engage in this moment? And I said, there's nothing to be torn about. There's everything to be engaged about, because this is not a us against them. This is a we for we, right? So it's not about, but then you got to look at the history of policing, right? Overseers of slaves, then you had the whole Willie Lynch area, then you had Jim Crow, then police departments became more professional. But I can say this, there is a certain way that we, law enforcement officers, are led and bred. So when we get out there, I mean, I was over policing my own community and didn't even realize it, but I was 22, 23, right? But then when you grow up in those behaviors and those systematic processes, you know, how do we, to Lindsay's point, uneducate? And to get back on the actual topic of the question, how do veterans help in this specific situation? The community many times sees us, right or wrong, as law enforcement. Because when we are on city streets, you know, pushing protesters back or doing our thing as the National Guard, right? Folks see that as law enforcement. So what we can do, I believe an action we can take, is as people in our community, talk to our neighbors. Because you might not be able to change the world, but you can change your world. And when I'm riding around in my little neighborhood and people roll down their window, and I'm one of the few Black families in here, and they say, oh my God, Bernice, we love you. What can we do? I said, talk to your white friends. Talk to your white friends. Because I keep on hearing people say, oh, I'm in the bubble. I don't want to watch the news today. I don't want to. No, I need you to talk to your kids about what's happening. because it's cyclical, it's generational, and it's passed down. And if we don't stop passing it down, if we don't start addressing it, acknowledging it, then finding the solution, which is going to be in conversation and teaching our folks something different, we're not going to seize this moment.
I believe that what veterans have a voice or have a responsibility to get involved in police reform. To be completely honest, I know that there is a deep divide between police communities and communities that they serve and that they are a part of. But I also think that veterans taking that voice, going back to that voice part, like about the authority and having the ability to speak to both the military experience and the militarized, and knowing what it feels like to live in a militarized society, like a heavily militarized society. And taking that voice and advocating for that not to become the American way. I'll be honest, like I stood at multiple protests this summer waiting for the National Guard to come and police me. And my responsibility from that moment forward and always has been to fight against this continuing militarization of our own communities. And I think that's our moral imperative here. We don't want to live in a war zone. Nobody here wants to live in a war zone or a militarized society where police officers wear the same guns as military members. We have to be advocating just as hard for a system that actually is equitable, doesn't over police and doesn't over militarize communities, as we do for people to see police officers as human beings. We have to fight for both.
Nathaniel, when you think about that from the perspective of a civilian person and how you look at us as veterans and how we move around your community, how do you think we can help bridge that gap from your lens? Nathaniel, you're on. There you go.
Thank you. I think there are two sides to this. I think a lot of times, again, it goes back to that initial question about how can we help. I think when we have this conversation, we usually gravitate more towards the military helping law enforcement versus gravitating towards how they can help the people mobilize and position themselves to be in a position of strength when they are engaged with law enforcement that is unjust, right? So for me, I think it may be just a natural progression because of how people have perceived what order is and what the responsibility of military is. And for me, it's one of the responsibilities is to protect democracy, right? And to protect the citizens and other people who live here from injustice. And so for me, I think that there is a part of it that, hopefully encourages some folks in the military to serve in law enforcement who care about creating a culture that is more inclusive. But again, we've already talked about, it's hard to fix a bad system that was perpetuated on a history of subjugation and white supremacy, right? But at the same time, I have not seen yet, and this is why I was really honored to participate in this conversation. I have not seen a real conversation yet about the other side of how can the military show up, not from the perspective of the law enforcement side, but how can the military veterans begin to engage on the other side of the fence and support movements and organizations and people who are standing up against injustice. For me, I think that is another opportunity that I think a lot of people miss out on.
Got it. Jeremy,
I have a question.
Yep.
Sorry.
Go
For
ahead.
Nathaniel, when you said you're interested to see how the military could be on the other side of the conversation and support movements, how could the military or veterans?
Well, veterans, not the military.
Gotcha.
But veterans.
So using their veteran status and saying, hey, I'm a veteran and I support this movement over here. And to me, that's like our white allies, right?
Right.
The middle-aged white guy is the most amazing person ever, because it's like he doesn't have a bone in the fight, right? But he does. It's our country. It's our community. So he does have a bone in the fight. Right. And people will look at him and say, okay, well, Bob, why do you care? Like this just because that's my fellow American.
Exactly.
And it's right. Exactly. So yeah, absolutely.
And it can go from serving on the board. Right. It doesn't. There are many, many ways. It could be being a volunteer coordinator for a nonprofit that does community events. It could be, again, being a volunteer in other aspects of the organization. It could be, playing a part on the philanthropic side of what nonprofits need in order to be successful. I mean, of course, there are other gifts and skills that you've learned around communications and other things that could be extremely beneficial to small organizations that are really trying to, push a big boulder up a hill. So there are many, many ways I think that veterans can play a valuable role in level setting the conversation, right? People always argue about this class warfare argument, but is it really a war when one side has a machine gun and the other one has a slingshot? I don't consider that a war. And so, again, I just think there's an opportunity for you all to level set the conversation.
Thank you. I agree. You're talking about engage and use our voice. Oh, and this is my granny saying, a closed mouth don't get fed.
That's right.
You need to stand up and speak up, right?
I love it.
I appreciate
A closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Don't. It's the South. Don't.
Okay, I'm from New York, but don't get fed. Okay.
Well, you got folks from somewhere down here.
Okay.
Like,
my mama's from Tuskegee.
Okay,
my mama's from Tuskegee. You got it. You win. You win.
Down here now.
Yes, sir. There you go. Boom, shakalaka. Hey, listen, folks, it's 5:50, and that was an invigorating conversation. I believe I'm going to give it back to Mary so she can ping it to Jared.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining here, all the participants, all the questions. We hope that you got your questions answered. If not, go ahead and put them in the chat box, the Q&A, all the things. Please reach out to all of our panelists. You've seen the organizations they represent. I'm going to go ahead and pitch it for them. They need help. They want your help. And if nothing else, write a check. But we just appreciate how much you all have invested in this conversation. I'm fired up. Thank you so much to Lindsay, Bernice, Nathaniel, Jeremy for taking of your valuable time and invested in this community here. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jared as you close us out, good sir.
Well, good evening, first and foremost, and thank you guys very much. This is definitely a good discussion, a very passionate discussion, and it takes me back, just like Mary and Cherie and many others. I've taken a lot of notes tonight, and I just want to say thank you very much. Myself, I served in the Army, 3rd Infantry Division, combat medic, and I'm from Long Island. And I have to, this question of what is the place of the veteran role in society really makes me think about what happened on 9/11. Being from Long Island and being in the Army and not being at home when 9/11 transpired, and looking at the people who were jumping out of the tower, realizing that I had a cousin who was serving at the Pentagon, and Vernice, you might be familiar with his name, General Willie Williams, who championed the effort to discuss the actions in the service of the Montfort Marines. Him reaching back and grabbing Marines, Airmen, Coast Guard, Army, soldiers, it didn't matter. I think about when I had to fly back to New York before we deployed because I had to visit my dad that had a stroke. And when you were in that uniform, the pride and the honor that you have when you're in that uniform, we had a lot of pride and a lot of art and a lot of honor when we crossed into Iraq, but you're also very, very humbled. And as a medic, I never thought I was going to get injured, but to get injured and have to take that magical flight to Landstuhl, Germany, and then to be pulled away from my fellow brothers and sisters in arms and wonder, what am I going to do with my life now as I move forward? During this conversation, one of the things that I had to kind of go back to is we all do this pledge of allegiance, and that is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It does not mean the person that you care for, the person that you don't care for. It means for all, and we're all countrymen. You talk about the work and what is the role again for veterans. Well, I don't know about everybody else, but we've been trained. We've been deprived of sleep, deprived of food. We understand what it is to go through hard times. I used to make fun of every branch of service. The Marines, you run too doggone far. It just is what it is. Doggone sailors, I don't know what the heck y'all doing in the ocean. Not gonna lie. But when that crap hit the fan and we had to go to Iraq, I think about our chief saying, hey, we needed something. I'm like, where the heck we gonna get this from? He said, just get me to some CBs and they'll get it. And I'm like, what the heck? Okay, we got to the CBs, they took care of it. When I was on the back of that plane and bandaged up, getting ready to take this magical flight to Longstool, I remember that flight medic telling me, Doc, I got it. Now, I don't know you from Adam. You don't look like me. You took my uniform is cut off of me. I'm bleeding. I'm naked, essentially. But that person said, Doc, I got it from here. I remember waking up freezing cold. And I remember before they rolled me into Longstool saying, I told you I got your back. So I have to think about what is it that we have as veterans. We understand what it is not to get along with people, but we understand that we all bleed the same color. We have the same passion. We have the same pride. We have shared experiences. When the bullets are flying, I don't care what you look like. I don't care about your background. So when you ask, what do we have? Fortitude, leadership, skills, heart, compassion, and understanding. But have we really used it to its fullest? No, we haven't. So I challenge all of our veterans. Let's stand up. Let's stand up. Let's show everybody what it is to be uncomfortable. When I would read letters from my daughter, I had 9 people on my back. Why? Because it wasn't just my daughter. She belonged to everybody. It's family. We're brotherhood. We're sisterhood. Again, it didn't matter what uniform you wore. It just mattered that you were there. When I look to the left and I look to the right, we need that in our communities. Nathaniel, you're right. Everybody has a role to play. So I challenge all of us to get uncomfortable, get out your house, wake up a little bit early, and go find somebody who does not look like you, who does not think like you, and have a doggone conversation. And for those who are uncomfortable with this, if you have served and you're still uncomfortable, it's fine. You will just be fine. How do we know? Because nobody was comfortable in basic training. And if you were, then I don't know what part of the military you were from, because you were not in the military that all of us served in.
Air Force.
I can't knock the Air Force because, hey, when they put me on that bird and they saved my behind,
I know.
I'm not
One
gonna
mission
do
won't go
that.
on team. I'll just kidding.
No. You can't talk about them. Even though you never have to walk your tray up when you're in the Air Force, they actually have somebody come get that for you. But at the same
Somebody
time,
to
hey,
scoop the ice
Marines,
cream,
your vehicles
right?
are all broken. Hey, your vehicles are all broken, Marines. Don't talk. That's why you got to run everywhere. But again, here's what I challenge everybody to do. Create your plan. And it doesn't have to be your plan. There's plenty of organizations that have a plan. Engage with those organizations, get uncomfortable. I don't care how old you are and what you look like, get uncomfortable because you got something to bring to the table. And act. Stop talking. We're sick and tired of talking. And this is coming from that old crusty, and I do mean crusty. You see these gray hairs, okay? But I will still smoke the dog devil out of anybody when it comes to some PT. And we need that. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody. And I would ask everybody, please take a few moments to watch this video from the Warrior Alliance.
I was very confident, very passionate. I love serving my country. I was determined.
What I cherish the most is the brotherhood. I miss the brotherhood more than I miss anything else.
Just being there for each other. It's a collective. It was my drive to be the best I could be because I wanted to see what was on the other side of the mountain.
When I got out, I thought I was fine. On the outside, I looked perfect. I could walk day to day. I could do everything I wanted to do. But inside, I was crumbling.
I think I learned from myself with the transition through civilian life is not what it's all paying out to be to us as we get out the military.
I went from being in for 12 years to getting out. And for me, that was one of the hardest challenges that I've ever had to do because you don't have that support system and you have to keep fighting.
Imagine in a big city, you don't know anything, anyone, trying to get around, but then you meet Warrior Alliance.
At first, I didn't want to accept it, that something was wrong with me because I thought I was okay. I had a nice job. I had everything going for myself. But I was destroying my family because I was not getting the treatment I needed for a long period of time.
When I was living in Austin, post-traumatic stress was one of the hardest things that I was going through. I was isolating. I was getting myself in debt. I was getting myself in trouble. And I knew I needed help. It's just I didn't know where to seek that help.
I had to walk away from a situation, kind of like lost my job in a sense. So I was in a transition position where I had to survive. The Warrior Alliance team gave me the tools. They gave me resources in order to move forward.
If it wasn't for the Warrior Alliance, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now.
And you know, with the Warrior Alliance, I ain't say I perfected my family life, but we started putting our family back together once again, and I appreciate that tremendously.
There's a lot of people that go to work and do a job, but everybody I've met from the Warrior Alliance, it's like they want to be there.
It's all about, I'm here for you. What do you need? How can I help you?
Provided me with direction, purpose, and motivation, and a constant friend to call if I needed anything.
That family environment that they produce or they create.
Advice, leadership, guidance, I promise you, they were there for me.
They have resources, and if they don't know, they will find somebody that does know. And I'm telling you from experience.
From brain injuries to home loans, people with, legal issues.
The Warrior Alliance said, hey, if you're, wanting to get a house or get an apartment, here's what we can do to help you out. And then if you want to volunteer, here's another resource that can help you volunteer. Said, hey, this is what we're going to accomplish. And I hit the ground running, and I didn't stop.
It's a whole community of resources for us to obtain to help our quality of life every day. My biggest goal right now is to continue on and never give up. Find that extra mile in anything that I'm doing. Warrior Alliance is helping me do that.
My biggest goal for myself is to really get to know myself again and put my family in a position where we're happy at all times.
In August, I'll be 17 years clean from alcohol. I didn't do it by myself. You got to have that support system.
Whatever that dream is, whatever your passion is, go after it. Don't allow anyone to tell you otherwise. Don't allow the negativity to be instilled within you. Just go for that joy, that voice in your head that's telling you, I can do more, I am more, there's more out there for me, and I can go make, all my dreams come true.
I just want to personally thank the Warrior Alliance for taking Chevy, under their wings. It's really helping him to be a better person, which is going to help us all be a better family.
I'm happy, I love the person that I've become. The Warrior Alliance's team has been phenomenal, and it's just a great opportunity to live a good life.